All right, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're about to get started in 2 seconds right here. We're just going to introduce ourselves on the radio, and we're going to get going. Here we go. Hello and welcome, USD, to your favorite sports talk radio show, Bix and K. Back for another week, third one of this semester. Excited to be with you guys. And I want to shout out everyone that's tuning in on Facebook Live. You guys have been great so far this year. Facebook has been an added aspect to our show that's been so much fun. Now, for those of you that are tuning in via Facebook Live, you may notice that my partner, Kay, who usually sits right over here to the left of me, is not here this week. And that is because, as my favorite Giants announcers, Kruk and Kipe, like to say, he is out on assignment. Don't worry, he'll be back next week. But you guys got me this week. So I'm running the show. That being said, I have a lot of stuff to talk about with you guys, but this is definitely a week where you can comment your questions, just comments, general concern, literally anything you want to talk about when it comes to sports. Throw it up on the Facebook Live. I'll answer as many of your questions as I can between segments. This will be a really fun week to interact with everyone. So please, if you got anything to say, comment it, and I'll try to play along with you guys and answer things as we go. That being said, let's get right into it. The World Series, got to start there. It's 3-2 Indians right now. It's been a great World Series so far. The Indians have looked like the stronger team for most of it, but the Cubs, you can't count the Cubs out yet. My original pick for the series was Indians in 6. They have a chance to fulfill that Tuesday night, so that would be a whole lot of fun if my prediction were to come true. I want to shout out right quick Adam Singer and Andrew Zimmer that are getting active on the comments right now. Appreciate it, guys. Get some questions in there. That way I can answer them for you. Anyway, back to baseball. The series so far has been a story of momentum, really. Everyone thought the Cubs would have it locked up coming into things. They looked like the stronger team. They certainly looked like the stronger team in Vegas. The Indians were heavy underdogs when things got going. But as we've seen, you can't predict anything that happens in baseball. And now with the Indians up 3-2, they are certainly the favorites going back to Progressive Field to wrap up this World Series. Now, a couple of the best moments in this series so far revolve around certain players. First thing that comes to mind is a guy like Kyle Schwarber for the Cubs, someone that most people really didn't think we would see for the rest of the season. Now, he comes back in a limited capacity, of course, as the DH for the Cubs. He still can't really play in the field, but he has certainly made a difference. I thought last week, if you guys tuned in to our show, that he wouldn't be that much of a factor. I had said that I probably wouldn't start him, and I still agreed with that when the series came to a start. Schwarber made a couple errors, namely in base running, that could have cost his team big in the end, but after that, it seemed like he kind of worked out the kinks, got things going, and really has been an asset to a team that, although their offense has been great this season, has really needed all the help they can get in the World Series. So, that being said, Schwarber's looked great. He's helped the Cubs, but it hasn't quite been enough yet. They're still going to need more production from their guys all around as we get into the last 2 games of the series, especially with the shift going back to Cleveland. Now, on the other side of the ball, you look at what the Indians have been able to do with their patchwork starting rotation. They're going with 3 guys right now. Kluber has been absolutely amazing. He's really lifted that team, and they've gotten a lot of help from their offense too. A couple of the games haven't been as close as we thought they would be. Namely, guys like Jason Kipnis bringing some offense a couple nights ago with a 3-run home run that he had. But really, again, like Kay and I were talking about last week, it comes down to this Indians bullpen that has been absolutely phenomenal. You look at the starters like Kluber, and yeah, they've done their job, they've done great, but Andrew Miller, again, one of those guys, probably the best acquisition any team made at the deadline this year. He has just been a rock for the Indians. Now, he stumbled a little bit, gave up his first runs of the postseason to the Cubs in the World Series just a couple days ago, but he has still been the X factor for this Indians team. When you can throw a guy out there that you have full confidence in, and he can give you a couple innings late in games, and you're just not concerned at all, that's incredible. And that's something that really not a lot of teams have, and really illustrates why you absolutely need to have a strong bullpen if you want to make a deep run into the Major League Baseball playoffs. So Andrew Miller, definitely been a key factor for the Indians. Their offense is playing great, but as all of you know out there that have played baseball and just have played sports in general before, baseball especially is a game of momentum. And that's where things get interesting as we get into Game 6 and possibly a Game 7 in the World Series. The Indians have looked like the dominant team the first couple games, up 3-2 now, but with that win, with that Game 5 win, the Cubs have put themselves in position to, hopefully for them, make a comeback. Now, it's not going to be easy. Very few teams have come down from being down 3-1 in a World Series to go on and win that same series. I believe the last time that happened was George Brett's Royals back in 85, when they came back to beat the St. Louis Cardinals. So it's an uphill task for the Cubs, but it's certainly something that has been done and is absolutely doable for a team with an offense as potent as the Cubs. But the Cubs are going to need more than just offense to get this thing done. They're going to need their pitching staff to step up. They've struggled a little bit early on in the series, but like I said with the Indians, if the Cubs can get their bullpen going and can shut the Indians down later in games, that is going to be the key for them. One of the biggest moments of the series, I thought, was in Game 5, Joe Maddon deciding to throw Aroldis Chapman out there for an 8-out save. Now, those of you who aren't as familiar with baseball may not be as well versed in how difficult getting a save in general is. And when you ask a guy to go out there and get not one inning, not 2 innings, but 2+ innings done as a closer, that's incredibly difficult to go out there and throw 8 outs. Aroldis Chapman did a great job. He had a lot of energy behind him, especially with the Wrigley Field crowd. The last game that will be played at Wrigley Field in this World Series, no matter what. And he did a great job. That Game 5, if the Cubs do go on to take this World Series, would go down as probably the turning point when you think about how Aroldis Chapman pitched, and really the Chris Bryant home run, I would argue, is one of the most important moments in this series if the Cubs do go on to win it all, because that shifted the momentum. It gave the Cubs a little boost, and like I was saying, with that home crowd at Wrigley, propelled them to get an extremely important win, and a win that obviously they needed to keep things alive. Now, as we go back to Cleveland, this is going to be tough because the Cubs are playing great. Like I'm saying, momentum is a huge, huge part of baseball in general, and when you get down to it, the last 2 games of the season, people are exhausted. They've played 170+ games, and anything can happen. I was reading an article today where I believe it was Chris Bryant talking about how he talked to a statistician, and 17 times throughout the year, this year, the Cubs lost a game and went on to win their next 3 games. So why can't they do it now? Down 3-1 in the series. They've already got 1 win under their belt. All they got to get is 2 more. Two more one-game series. Now, if you put it like that, it seems extremely doable for a team that was arguably the best team in baseball for the better part of the season. And especially when you bring back a key guy like Schwarber. Kevin Jerger, shout out to you for commenting. Talked about him a little bit, but especially when you bring back guys like that energize your lineup, anything can happen, really. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't necessarily realize how much traveling is actually important for teams, whether that's because things can get difficult when you're traveling so much. That's a lot of what the conversations revolve around, but what people don't touch on a lot of the time is how traveling helps a team, especially in baseball when teams are traveling so much. They play 82 games away during the season, 81, plus anything they get to in the postseason. Those are times where you're really building up your team camaraderie and where guys are coming together. And especially in a moment like this, the Cubs have another chance to get on that plane today, wear their Halloween costumes. I think it's actually encouraged for the Cubs to dress up. That was the attire for their plane ride today, Halloween costumes only. So you just take fun moments like that and you use it to bond as a team. They're far from being out of this thing, and this is when they have to look to their leaders, guys like Anthony Rizzo that have been with the club for the last couple years. He's one of the only players in baseball history, I think, to be a part of a 100-loss team and a 100-win team. So it's incredibly valuable to have a guy like that on your roster. Even though he is young, he's been around for a couple years, he knows the deal, and he was even, before Game 5, giving his guys a little pump-up, Rocky Balboa-style speech to get them going, which is just incredible. This is a team that has a lot of fun, and that's going to come back to help them in the end, because you don't want a bunch of guys traveling together that are tight. They're worried about what could happen. This Cubs team has confidence in every single one of their players, top to bottom of the roster, and they're just... Hold on one second. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Facebook Live viewers. It looked like we were disconnected there for a little bit. Hopefully you heard the end of that, talking about Anthony Rizzo and whatnot. Shout out to Ian Latucci for commenting on the Facebook feed. Thanks, Ian. But yeah, getting back to it, anything can happen in the last two games. Personally, I'm still sticking with the Indians. I think despite the momentum the Cubs have garnered in Game 5, going back to Cleveland is going to be a huge asset for the Indians. I think it's a close game. They may even win it in a walk-off, but I think the Indians still have the edge. I'm sticking with my prediction, going with them in 6, but the Cubs are not going down easy. Now, the last thing I want to touch on as it comes to Major League Baseball before we move on today is going back to Aroldis Chapman. Now, a lot of you may or may not know that earlier this season, Chapman started out with the New York Yankees. And during his tenure with the Yankees, he was accused of domestic violence. It was a case that went to court. I believe the charges may have been dropped. Don't quote me on that. But under Major League Baseball's domestic violence policy, Aroldis Chapman was still suspended for 30 games. He served a suspension, but much like some of the issues with domestic violence that the NFL is facing right now, I do not think that Major League Baseball necessarily handled this the best. I mean, you're seeing these suspensions given out, and it's really nothing in the end for an issue that is incredibly serious. So I read another article this week. I read a lot of interesting things this week. I know I keep referencing back to stuff. Unfortunately, I forget the woman's name, but she's a longtime Chicago Cubs fan, and she was trying to reconcile the fact that at the midpoint of the Cubs season, they traded for Aroldis Chapman, who has been accused of all these awful things. And being a Cubs fan, a World Series doesn't come around very often. So for her, this was an incredible opportunity to support her team, see something that she may realistically never get to see again in her lifetime. And coupling that with the fact that the Cubs traded for someone that didn't really align with her personal values is incredibly tough, and it's an issue that I think a whole lot of fans were struggling with. But the way she dealt with it was actually really awesome. And what she did was she decided that when Chapman came over mid-season to the Cubs, every time he recorded a save, she would donate $10 to a cause that helped victims of domestic violence, which seems very small at the beginning when you think about it. I mean, it's only $10. I think Aroldis did rack up 16 saves as a member of the Cubs, so that's $160 from her alone. But she used the power of social media, and specifically Twitter, to start a hashtag that was hashtag Stand Up for DV, domestic violence, and so many other people joined in that I believe the cause actually raised upwards of $20,000 when it was all said and done for victims of domestic violence, helping them get back on their feet and all that good stuff. So, I don't know, for me personally, that was just a really cool story because in this day and age of social media, a lot of people focus on the negatives, but there are a lot of positives to be had, especially when you can spread around a good cause like this woman was doing. So unfortunately, again, I forget her name, but shouts out to her. That's something awesome that I wish I'd thought of. And definitely, if you guys ever see anything like that, whether it's in the field of sports or not, use social media, use these new avenues that we have to promote a good cause, because you never know. It may start with you, but it won't end with you. You'll influence other people, you'll get other people to join in, and you never know what kind of a difference you can make. So there you go. That's my feel-good story of the week. And that's going to wrap it up for Major League Baseball discussions today. Unless you guys have any questions, please, comments, questions, anything, hit me up on Facebook Live. I'll try to answer as many as I can between segments. Just a reminder for those of you who are tuning in now, Kay, as you can see, is not here today, not by my side, unfortunately. He is out on assignment. He will be back next week, don't worry. But it's up to me today, so you're going to get to hear me go off on a few different things. We're about to get into the NFL, but again, any questions you have, I'd love to answer them. Today is a great, great day for that, so go for it. All right, now, moving into the NFL. This is a tough topic for me because I've been a huge Niners fan, as most of you know, since I was a kid. I love the NFL. I consider myself a true fan. I've watched games ever since I was little. But today I want to spend a lot of time telling you guys why the NFL is not what it used to be and why I'm incredibly disappointed in the direction that the league is heading. Now, there's been a lot of discussion this week and prior, the last couple months actually, about why the ratings for the NFL have dropped. It seems like everyone and their grandmother has their own opinion. It's a tough issue, and I believe that there are a whole lot of things that go into it. It's not just one easy thing that can be fixed, but I want to go into every aspect that I believe is hurting the NFL in terms of ratings and in terms of fans in general, because really the NFL is going in the wrong direction, and hopefully we can right that ship in the coming years and get viewership back up. So the first thing I want to go into is how red zone, things like fantasy football, social media in a sense, and really the casual fan are killing the 3-hour broadcast that us football fans are all so used to. Now, the first one, NFL Red Zone. Those of you who aren't familiar with Red Zone, it's basically a program that you can purchase through your TV provider, and it sounds exactly like its name. It is exactly what its name describes. Every time a team gets in the red zone, they will flip to that game and show you the important things that are going on. Someone's about to score. Now this has a lot of relevance for those people out there that are playing fantasy. And really the casual fan that doesn't want to sit down and watch a 3-hour NFL broadcast like we're used to doing. So it's kind of playing into this, I don't like saying this, but a lot of older people seem to blame us millennials these days for this kind of ADD culture. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. I'm sorry if it isn't, but they blame us of not being able to focus on one thing, skipping around. We're not satisfied with 1 3-hour broadcast. And that's kind of sad to me, because as someone that does love to watch that one game every Sunday, I miss when that was the only thing that was on TV, and now you have people that are really only interested in when all these random teams are in the end zone, and they don't stick around to watch a full game. And a lot of that plays into fantasy football and how big the fantasy industry has gotten in the last couple of years. Now, in order to kind of depict this for you guys, I want to talk about my own personal experience with my little brother Mickey. Now, Mickey, if you're listening, I'm sorry about to gas you a little bit, but he is very different than I am. Mickey watches Red Zone. He's a Niners fan. Yeah, he loves his Niners, but he's going to root for LaShawn McCoy when the Niners are playing him, because LaShawn's on his fantasy team and he needs to do well and he needs to beat his friends, which, I love beating my friends in fantasy football too, but regardless of whether you start LaShawn McCoy against the Niners or not, you can't root for him. You can't sit there and tell me you're going to root for LaShawn McCoy to go off against your favorite team. It's difficult because so many fans are becoming like that today. They're only interested in this fantasy team that they have drawn up for themselves. It's very personalized, and that's why it's so addicting and why people love it so much, because you feel like you have control over this team. It's a unique group of players that you drafted, you put your faith in, and they're going to hopefully bring you glory, take you to the championship, and allow you to gloat over your friends for the next year. The problem is, when that happens, when people are switching to watching Red Zone because they're so interested in fantasy football as opposed to watching these 3-hour broadcasts, that is really hitting those major stations hard, because you're losing so many viewers. And in the NFL's attempt to attract the casual fans with all this glitz and glamour going around the actual playing field, they're losing those fans like myself that just want to sit there and watch their own team. So that makes it extremely difficult when you have people that are only interested in their own team, and they're not really paying attention to the broadcasts that matter, their hometown team. So unfortunately, as much as I do love Red Zone, I'm ragging on it a lot. There is a time and a place for it. I would still rather watch my 3-hour broadcast. It drives me crazy when my little brother wants to, while I'm home, wants to flip to the Red Zone channel while I'm trying to watch the Niners game and a 3-hour game. Even though it's commercials, I don't want to be flipping back and forth to Red Zone. I really don't care what's going on outside of my game at that moment. So Red Zone is very cool. It's something that's been, an interesting development in how we watch and consume football. But in the end, I really hope that people revert back to rooting for their hometown teams, going and watching that broadcast, because I think that's the tradition of football. And, call me old-timey, but I don't know. I just think that's the way to go. Shout out to everyone that's commenting on the Facebook live feed right now. I promise I will get to your questions. I'm in the midst of kind of my rant about the NFL, but don't worry, I will get to everything you guys are commenting. So, talked about Red Zone, talked about fantasy. The next thing I want to go into is the No Fun League. That's really what the NFL is becoming in my mind, especially thanks to guys like Commissioner Goodell. Unfortunately, I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place, because I appreciate a lot of the things that Commissioner Goodell has done for the league. I think he overall has done a fairly good job, but there is still a whole lot of things that I think he has dropped the ball on and has not dealt with as well as he could have. And I say the No Fun League because that's really what the NFL is becoming. We're not seeing player personalities anymore. I mean, I don't know. I think back to when I watched the 49ers back, 10 years ago even, and you had guys like T.O., Terrell Owens, that if I've ever seen a character, I mean, that guy had to be it. He was such an awesome player, but had this incredible personality to go along with it. Whether people liked him or not, I don't really care. All I know is that he made things exciting, whether it was through his play on the field or his celebrations after he would score a touchdown. A lot of Niner fans and maybe Cowboys fans will remember the day that T.O. caught a touchdown pass against the Cowboys and actually sprinted out to midfield to throw the football down on the Dallas Cowboys star at midfield. Like, what? That's who does that? But it's incredibly entertaining. And the Cowboys came back at him. Emmitt Smith did the same thing after he scored. T.O. wound up scoring a second time, and then, everything broke loose. But I don't want to advocate, fighting in the NFL and getting into brawls and having the benches clear, but there certainly were a lot more characters when you think of guys like Chad Ochocinco a decade ago that made the NFL so much fun to watch. And now with Goodell and league executives implementing all these penalties and fines and trying to discourage players from being themselves and celebrating, it's just simply not as exciting to watch anymore. I don't know how else to say it. Like, you have guys like Norman, the corner for the Redskins, who is fined for doing a little bow and arrow gesture after he makes a good play, which I really don't see the harm in that. Yeah, you don't want players making offensive gestures and whatnot, but that's never really happened before. They're just gloating. It's like you beat your friend in fantasy football and you're going to gloat over him for that next week or for that next year or however long it is. It's the same thing with guys playing football. This is their livelihood. This is what they grew up playing, and they've dedicated their life to it, so they love it to a fair amount. You want to allow them to express how fun the game really is. When you don't let them celebrate, it's just not as fun. And on another end of that, I want to talk about Antonio Brown for a minute, because a couple weeks ago, Antonio Brown, star wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, was actually fined for twerking as his celebration. Now, mind you, he is not an expert twerker. Didn't look great. Just kind of looked like he was moving his butt around a little bit. But he was fined something like $25,000 for that. And to me, that just doesn't sit right. I read another interesting take on this incident that talked about how the NFL quite literally pays cheerleaders to sit or stand on the sideline and dance around with, not a whole lot of clothes on, and shake their butts, just like Antonio Brown was doing in his celebration. And yet it's completely fine when the NFL is endorsing and paying women to do it on the sideline, but when one guy does it as a celebration because he scores a touchdown for about 5 seconds, he gets fined $25,000. Now, how is that not a double standard? It just seems pretty weird to me. And it's not something that sits well. I think it looks bad on the NFL. They're not allowing their players to be themselves, because that's what people connect to. People are going to connect to that crazy guy that just wants to go out and celebrate after he's scored a touchdown. And those are the characters that draw people in and create, compelling storylines. Now, you kind of ran into that last year with Norman and Odell Beckham getting into their feud. Again, not endorsing the fighting end of that, but it's a lot of fun to see guys talk smack and go at each other and celebrate when something good happens. So this is especially a thing where I think the NFL is headed in the wrong direction. I think they need to correct this if they can. I don't know if that's going to happen soon or later on, but that's another aspect that I think is really is really hurting the NFL. And to answer Dylan Zuber's question, if you're still listening, Dylan asked, has the dab died yet? And Dylan, I'm going to say yes, in the NFL it has. Now, you might walk around your college campus and see a bunch of kids dabbing as they're dancing, and a lot of people have picked it up. But in the NFL, it is dead, especially with the season that the Carolina Panthers are having. Cam Newton was the guy that kind of started this whole craze, and when he's not doing as well, it's going to die out. So, Dylan, thanks for the question. In the NFL, the dab is dead. Kay, I see you out there just tuning in now. Hope you like the show from the other end. Can't wait to have you back next week. Kay says he's shouting out everyone from New York City. Can't wait to have you back in the studio, bud. All right. Next, moving on to the next thing that is hurting the NFL is games these days are over-officiated. Now, you can argue different sides to this. I strongly believe that these games are being over-officiated. Not everyone will agree with me, but officials these days seem to think that the games are about them. That's not at all the case. We have never and never will pay for zebras out there to be making calls, and that's not what we're interested in. We want to see the guys on the field play with the minimum amount of interaction from the refs as humanly possible. Now, penalties were developed for a reason. Obviously, they're a big part of the game. I'm not saying get rid of them, but people have gotten so minute in the details the last couple of years that they've kind of forgotten that football is a physical game. Now, things are going to happen, players are going to get bumped, but these days, pass interference is being called for everything. In the first three quarters, what's interesting is, like I said, in those first three quarters, there are being so many flags thrown, but when it comes down to it and things get serious in the fourth quarter, at the end of games, especially in the last 5 minutes, you're not going to see a whole lot of flags, which is concerning to me because, if anything, that is a point in the game that should be extremely, extremely well officiated. That's because, obviously, that's when the game is going to be decided. A lot of these close games have come down to bad last-second calls or no calls that the officials just don't seem to want to get right at some points. I mean, there have been some no calls that have been so clear to me, yet have not been called on the field, and the other way around. So there's so much over-officiating going on in the first three quarters, and everything is getting dropped in the fourth quarter. In my opinion, calls should be reviewable, especially pass interference calls late in games that can decide things. As a former, high school sports player, myself, you always talk to coaches that say, don't let it come down to the officials. Don't let them decide the game in the fourth quarter. But sometimes you've played a great game. You've played to the best of your ability. You've shown what you can do, and it just so happens that the game is still tied in the fourth quarter. And then an official makes a call that affects the outcome of the game. Now, whether that's good or bad for you, it doesn't matter. In the interest of the league, the officials should want to get these calls right no matter what the stake. Whether, they might look a little silly for making a bad call or not, that should be the overall main goal of all officials across the NFL, is to simply get the call right. So, really, in the end, there just needs to be better officiating. We need to let the guys play a little bit. Don't call every little touch as wide receivers are running down the field, but you got to get the calls right in the end. Stop throwing so many flags, but when you throw them, get them right. So there you go. Continuing on, I wanted to talk about how oversaturated the NFL has become in recent years. Now, for those of you out there that have been lifelong fans of the NFL, you know that 10, 15 years ago, Sunday was the Sabbath. That's when you watched your football. All the games were that day, and you had Monday night as that little bonus, extra something, exciting game, excuse me, that you look forward to every week. Nowadays, when you look at how things are going, your week starts, the NFL week starts, on Thursday night. That never used to be a thing all season long. There was never continuous Thursday night games. Now there is. Occasionally, as we get later into the season, you will see the, albeit rare, but you will see the Saturday night game, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. You still have all your games on Sunday, and you have Monday night. So that's 3 consistent days, if not 4, late in the season, that football is available to everyone. And as cool as that is, to have a lot of football going on all the time, that hurts your ratings because it's not special anymore. It's not something that you've waited the entire week for. You're excited to see your team play. I mean, you've already seen football on Thursday. The week has kind of started. If you miss a game, so what? It's just a shame because, like I said, it used to be that one special thing that you sat down on Sunday afternoons and that was it. You had to wait for it once a week, twice a week maybe if you were able to watch the Monday night game. But now it's become so oversaturated. There's commercials for the NFL 24/7. There's a whole lot of play going on. They're advertising games in London, games on Thursday nights. It's just simply not as special anymore because football is happening all the time. Now, a lot of people will argue with me on that point, saying that more football is better. And I can't argue with the fact that being able to watch football a lot more than on Sunday is pretty cool. But after a season or two of having games on Thursday night every week, it's losing its spark. I don't have to wait that long anymore for it, and so it's inherently not as special. That's my opinion. You guys can fight me about it in the comments. But there you go. Moving on to Cap's protest. A lot of people want to say that Kaepernick's protest is not hurting the NFL, and I think that's flat out wrong. No matter what you think of Kaepernick's protest, I know Kay and I have talked about what our opinions are the last couple weeks on the show, but whatever you think of what Kaepernick is doing, you cannot argue that he is not hurting the NFL to some degree. With that said, I think with this whole situation, it's hurting the NFL less to let Cap keep going than to just simply shut him down. For a long time, the face of the NFL were guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and these great quarterbacks. I mean, I know Tom is still around, but guys like Peyton Manning, and you go back even further to your Dan Marinos, these guys were the face of the league. And now with a lot of the retirements that have happened recently, if you look around and you pay attention to the media, Kaepernick is the face of the NFL, in my opinion. And that is not good for them because the face of the league has become someone that is protesting it. And obviously, you're going to have a contingent of fans that are so upset with what Kaepernick is doing that is undisputedly going to affect your ratings. But like I said earlier, if the league were to come in and shut Kaepernick down and say, that's it, you're done, we don't want to hear anything about this protest, that would hurt them even more in the eyes of the media because they would be taking away free speech and it would just be a disaster. So this is not necessarily the NFL's fault, but it is something that is hurting their ratings because they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can't say no to Cap, but on the other hand, the longer his protest goes on, the more people are losing interest and becoming annoyed with the NFL as a whole. And lastly, what I want to talk about is how the NFL has become this money-grubbing institution that really doesn't seem to care about the health and well-being of its players. CTE is something that's been at the forefront of the issues surrounding football in the recent years. And for a while there, it was at the forefront of everything the NFL was talking about. Once they were forced to kind of admit that this was a problem, they started handling it. But a couple years removed from that, now we're seeing it hit the back burner. And it's not being talked about as much anymore. The NFL is trying to play it down so that it won't affect younger kids who are wanting to get into the game, and especially those parents that are worried about having their kids play football, because it's a tough sport. You're gonna get hurt, and if you play it for as long as some of these professionals do and don't get the correct help and rehab for certain injuries, it's gonna affect you for the rest of your life, no doubt. So the NFL has completely put CTE on the back burner, hoping to get rid of it, get it out of the media eye, so that they can continue to make their money. Another thing that has really irked me is, again, I talked about with Aroldis Chapman the issues with domestic violence that he had with Major League Baseball. Domestic violence in football doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I don't know why it seems to be so prevalent in football these days, but it's an issue that has to be addressed. And most recently, when you look at the New York Giants and how they handled their kicker Josh Brown, who wrote his biography, his memoir, and admitted to abusing his wife. Now, he corrected himself and said he never physically hit his wife, I believe, or abused her physically, but still, any sort of abuse at all should not be tolerated, and it just goes to show you how this kind of thing is still being swept under the rug in the NFL. You can't tell me that not one person in that Giants organization didn't know about Josh Brown and the issues that he was going through. And in that situation, you need to, like the Giants did, just cut the player, plain and simple. I do believe in second chances. Hopefully Josh and guys like him can straighten themselves out, can make good for what they've done. It's not at all easy, and it's not something that should be forgiven easily at all. But when you look at guys like Ray Rice, who are going around and doing their best to promote awareness for domestic violence and trying to make sure that no one else makes the mistakes that they did, I think that's incredibly noble, and whether or not he and others get another shot in the NFL is a discussion for another day, but domestic violence needs to be handled better by the NFL. It's just that plain and simple. You have another issue rising up this week. It stemmed from the beginning of the year with Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott being accused of domestic abuse, domestic violence. The case was ultimately dropped, but the NFL is just now beginning to conduct their own investigation, and there's still a possibility that Zeke gets suspended. And if he does, then there's clearly something there that authorities missed, or that was swept under the rug, or people didn't want to pay attention to. So again, the NFL is more interested in promoting their product and making money off these guys than actually paying attention to some of the awful things that they've done and trying to get them help. On a little bit different plane, when you look at a guy like Johnny Manziel that had the issues that he did, and he still continues to struggle with a lot of his personal issues, the NFL didn't care. They promoted, they made money off of him, and he got kind of kicked to the curb. Granted, he may have deserved it, and he was not the best person, but still, the NFL bottom line needs to care more about their players than they do about making money, and that is not something that is happening right now. And the last thing I want to say on this issue of the NFL, I know I've gone on for a long time, is that the product is just down as a whole. You take away all the off-field issues, you take away all the social media, you take away fantasy, you take away red zone, everything. Get rid of everything, throw it out the window. What you see on the field is not as good as what we saw a decade ago. You look around the league, and what's the best matchup you can come up with? Comment in the comment section on the Facebook live feed. Who's the best? What are the best two teams you can think of to play each other this year? A lot of people say in the AFC it would be the Steelers and the Patriots. Big Ben, Tom Brady. That's a fairly decent matchup. But it's still, I would argue, not as good as a Peyton Brady matchup from a couple years ago. And overall, you just look around the league, and there aren't that many games where I'm saying to myself, I gotta watch this. This is gonna be a great game. I'm excited. I'm gonna sit down, watch the whole thing, and it's gonna be worth it, and it's gonna be a great game. It's just not happening. And I know this is a difficult game. I don't want to comment on guys' talent level because obviously I can't play football at the professional level, and it's an incredibly tough thing to do, but it just seems like the play isn't as good as it has been previously. And really, when it comes to quarterbacks as well, there aren't that many elite matchups, like I was saying. When you look around the league, it's tough. There's not that many matchups that I want to see. You look at a game like tonight, you got the Vikings and the Bears. Sam Bradford against Jay Cutler on a Monday night game in the middle of the season. The Vikings are playing well. Yeah, the Bears are pretty bad. That's just not a matchup that I want to see. And it's not exclusive to Monday night only. You have bad Sunday night games. You have god-awful Thursday night games like we saw with Tennessee and Jacksonville this last week. One team was literally giving up on the field. Now that's embarrassing for both the Jaguars and for the NFL. You can't come up with a better product than that? Really? So, there you have it. The talent level's just got to get better. The NFL has to find a way to just put a better product on the field. Simple as that. Now, I'm going to move on. Thank you guys for hanging with me through that whole NFL rant. Something that's close to my heart that I wanted to get off my chest for the last couple weeks. So there you go. Now, I do want to go back and address a couple of the questions that people have been commenting throughout my long rant. Thank you guys for sticking around. Tyler Humphrey asked, why is Jay Ajayi really going off? I believe his exact word was, why is Jay Ajayi raging? It's a mixture of things. He wasn't someone that was expected to have a huge role necessarily in Miami, but as we've seen the last couple of weeks, he has the talent to be an every down back. Now, his performance isn't going to be the same throughout the season. He's going to falter. It's going to be tough. He's kind of new, so the defenses will figure him out. They will get used to playing against him, wrapping him up, tackling him, all that sort of stuff. So it may be a little short-lived for now, but he is a talented back that can handle the load. And Miami got off to a little bit of a rough start at the beginning of the season, but I do think that they can get back on track, and they will need their running game if they are going to do that. So thank you, Tyler, for the question. And now I'm going to go back a little bit. Sorry, I gotta reach over here to get to your guys' questions as they're on my phone. Robert Walker asked me to talk a little bit about today's Monday night game, as he is a Vikings fan. I know I just touched on that a little bit, but I'll go a little more in depth. Like I was saying, Bradford, Jay Cutler, not a super exciting matchup to watch. That being said, the Vikings are playing extremely well this season, and I've gotten the question a lot in the last couple weeks of, are the Vikings a legitimate Super Bowl contender? Can they win it this year? And much to Robert's dismay, my answer to that question right now is no. They're an extremely talented team, but I don't see them getting to the Super Bowl, let alone winning a Super Bowl. They're at a point in their season where they're saying, Sam Bradford, here you go. Run with it, young man. This is your team. Go win us some football games. And Bradford is a decent quarterback, but he's not a guy that you can do that with. The Vikings are a team that's built around running the football with Adrian Peterson. They have accumulated some good wideouts in recent years, but you need a quarterback that's going to be able to get a ball to those guys when it counts. And Bradford has proven the last couple of years, as he's bounced around from team to team, that he just may not be that guy. He's not talented, but when it comes down to it, at the end of the season, he is not an Aaron Rodgers, and he's not the guy that's gonna win you a football game when you need it. The Vikings defense, on the other hand, is very talented. I think they are to credit for a lot of the team's wins this year. If they can keep playing well, I picked them to win the division. I think they can close out the NFC North fairly easily. If they keep playing at the high caliber that they are at right now. But I don't see them, unfortunately, making a deep run into the playoffs. Sorry about that, Robert, but thank you for the question. It is much appreciated. Armand Cholera is asking when I think Spencer Ware will come back. I don't know, Armand. I wish I had a better answer for you. It's going to take some time for the doctors to figure things out with Ware. They're going to be really careful with him. He's been an asset for them this year, especially with Jamal Charles being out. And I think really when he is ready and able to come back, he and Charles are going to split duties from now on, which makes it tough on fantasy owners, but is a real weapon for the Chiefs because they're two very talented young backs that can get the job done. So there you go. Thank you, Armand, for the question. Looking back, I think that's all we have for now. We're going to move on a little bit, and I want to talk about something that is close to the hearts of the sports fans that are from San Diego. All right, so I want to get into this issue of, are the Chargers staying or are they going? It's been something that's been talked about for the last, 2 years, seemingly. This, will they stay, will they go? We don't know. They are going, they aren't going. We just can't seem to tell. But San Diegans will get some clarity in the next couple days after election season, as there are two measures on the ballot in San Diego, Measure C and Measure D, that will have a big say in whether the Chargers hang around in San Diego or not. So I wanted to give you guys a quick overview of what both these measures talk about, because it can get a little confusing. And stick with me, I'm not an expert on these two measures. I was reading up on them last night, so I could tell you guys a little bit about them. They're very interesting, and will have a lot to say in the development or not of a new stadium for the San Diego Chargers. So essentially, if you look at Measure C, what the city is proposing is that the transient occupancy tax, TOT, be raised 6% from 10.5% to 16.5%. Now, this tax will not directly be imposed on San Diegans. It's actually being imposed on those that are visiting, those that are fueling the tourism industry, coming in, renting hotels, staying here in San Diego. Their taxes will be raised 6 cents on every dollar, and this money will be put towards funding in the San Diego community, and it would help fund a new stadium for the Chargers and other parks, and expand convention centers for things such as Comic-Con, which is big in the San Diego community. So this would probably raise around $350 million to put towards a new stadium. And the Chargers in the NFL would in turn contribute $650 million in private investment to complete the facility that they're hoping to build right by Petco Park in downtown San Diego. The tough thing would be figuring out parking arrangements if the stadium is built with the Padres, because it would take, the new stadium would take about 1,000 parking spots away from the Padres, and the Chargers would have to find a way to get those spots back to the Padres within a year. So, a vote yes on Measure C would essentially raise the transient occupancy tax, bring the city some money in order to build this new stadium, and it wouldn't be being paid for, in theory, by San Diegans. Now, those who are against the measure are saying that they don't want to raise this TOT tax 6% because essentially it will harm the tourism industry in San Diego. People won't want to come pay more for hotels, they'll spend less money, and as a result, people working in the tourism industry here in San Diego will lose their jobs. And that's not something you want to see at all. So it's a tough issue. I wanted to lay it out for you guys so that you know, especially those of you who live in San Diego, so you can make an informed vote. Again, I suggest you go read up on it because I can't explain all the little intricacies going on in each measure, but check it out. It's really important. I, for one, hope the Chargers stay, but really you want the city to make the right decision. So go check it out. Measure D, on the other hand, kind of piggybacks on C, and this would raise the TOT tax from 10.5% to 15.5%, and these revenues would be sent directly to the general fund of the city, and Measure D would prohibit San Diego officials from using the collected money for anything without approval or a vote from San Diegans. So again, it's much of a similar issue. People are wary of possibly raising that TOT tax as it could hurt San Diegans indirectly. But like I said, go read up on it, check it out. It's extremely important, and make an informed vote. Get out there. So there you go. Moving on to college football. So, on Bix and K, we talk a lot about college football, day-to-day stuff, who won, who didn't, whatnot. I'm not going to focus on that today. I'm sorry. We'll get back to it next week. There's just something really interesting that I wanted to talk to you guys about, and it's this concept that 3 is the magic number. Now, you may ask, why is that the case? Not just because it's my personal lucky magic number, but because that is the amount of years that college football players are targeting to spend at their universities as we go forward. And this is highlighted by a guy like Deshaun Watson, who knew from the beginning that he was coming to Clemson for 3 years. He had the skills of a 5-tool quarterback, but he knew coming in that he was going to start school early and he was going to get out in 3 years because these guys just want to get to the NFL. They want to make their money, but they also want a degree. And the impressive thing to me is that guys are actually thinking about getting this degree as they're also looking for a future in college football. Deshaun Watson, since he started at Clemson, has been taking 18, 19, even 20 sometime credits per semester in order to graduate on time in 3 years, which is incredibly difficult to do. Those of you at USD and really at any university can relate to that. I mean, that's taking 6 or 7 classes per semester, trying to get all the credits that he can, including going to class over the summer so that he can get through school as quickly as possible. Because, as a lot of you know, the NFL is a lot more strict on what college players can do. They can't declare for the draft until they have completed, I believe it's 3 years in college. They have to go through their junior year before they can declare for the draft. So it's just interesting to see this trend of players really getting their stuff together so that they can get out of here early, because it's not like a future NBA player where you can come in for 1 year, do your one and done, pay your dues, and move on. These guys have a lot of risk going on because they have to stay for 3 years. You could get hurt a number of different things. You could have a down year and get drafted lower. And believe me, that makes a huge difference. A mediocre year after a standout year in college football can really affect someone's draft stock. So you see a bunch of guys, not just Deshaun Watson, but guys like Leonard Fournette, Josh Rosen, who are doing the same thing. And an interesting point Josh Rosen made, he's the quarterback at UCLA, is really, football's an incredibly violent sport, like I was talking about earlier, and the quicker you can get to the show, to the bigs, the better, because your career will be longer, you'll make more money, and that's what guys want. I mean, they love playing in college, but what happens if you do get hurt? That's something you can't plan for, and another reason guys just want to get through that draft as early as possible. Now, this concept of 3 and done is not just something that's being talked about amongst players. It's also becoming a fact that coaches are accepting. You look at a guy, or you go over to Clemson again, and talk to Dabo Swinney, the head coach of the Clemson Tigers, Deshaun Watson's coach, and he fully recognizes that it's a 3 and done situation for his players. He supports it. He's glad that they can go off and make the money they deserve. But that affects him as a coach as well, because it affects how he recruits. It affects how he plays certain players, when they get to play. Guys are playing earlier and earlier nowadays because the red shirt is going away. Since they're coming into college, ready to play right away, especially the most talented of the bunch, the future first-round draft picks. They just want to get in and get out, and that's it. They're not taking the time to redshirt, and as a result, they're having to learn a lot on the fly, and maybe having to learn even more when they get to the NFL level. So it's incredibly impressive that they're able to do this. They're maybe losing a little bit in the end because they're having to learn more at the NFL level as opposed to really taking the time to get things under control when they're in college and taking a year to redshirt and learning the ropes in general. But they are accomplishing their goals faster, and they are getting to the NFL faster. And getting this degree is really important for a lot of players. In the article I read, Deshaun Watson's mom actually mentioned the fact that her son getting his degree in communication from Clemson is by far more important to her than him possibly winning the Heisman, which is great because hopefully players can put that emphasis on their education. I know there's been a lot of scandals in recent years about this pay for play and guys are taking easier classes, but if guys like Deshaun can really put in that effort and get that degree, they're well set up for their life in the future, and it's only going to help them. Now, Tyler Humphreys commenting again, asking me, do athletes deserve this much money? Does our society promote the right things? And that's a great question, Tyler. Thank you for asking. It's also a very difficult question because we've been so accustomed to young guys coming out of college and athletes in general being paid ridiculous amounts of money when really they haven't done anything at the professional level yet. That being said, I think they do deserve a whole lot of money, especially in a sport like football where you're putting essentially your mental and physical health on the line every day you go out there. You're playing and entertaining for a national audience. You're away from your family for long periods at a time. And you put so much work into getting to the point that you're at in your career that, yeah, I think they do deserve a lot of money. It's tough because there are a lot of members of our society that aren't compensated as fairly, and it's easy to kind of blame athletes in a way for this, but if you're being offered millions of dollars, you would take it too, I guarantee it. So it's tough. I think they do deserve the money that they're getting, but our society also needs to put emphasis on maybe some of the people that aren't getting paid as well that should be, like teachers or, people whose work often goes unnoticed but is extremely important. So another aspect of that question, Tyler, is is our society promoting the right things? Because I do think the athletes deserve their money, but sometimes, like I was talking about when I went off on my rant about the NFL, is these professional leagues, when they're letting things like domestic violence and alcohol and drug abuse slide, are absolutely not promoting the right ideals at all. They need to be taking harder stances on certain issues that are affecting our players, because you want to set an example for the young kids that are watching you on TV, and not even young kids, just everyone that's watching at home. You don't want the face of your league to be guys that are getting arrested for domestic violence. That's not what anyone wants. So in general, I think these leagues need to promote better behavior. They need to have harsher punishments for things that deserve to be punished, so that once this accountability starts at the top, it'll trickle down and players will hold themselves more accountable. Organizations and specific teams will hold their guys more accountable, and in the end, we will get a better product as a result. So Tyler, I hope that answers your question. Thank you so much for asking it. And now getting back to what I was talking about a couple minutes ago, this 3 is the magic number concept. A couple numbers for you guys. This last year, 96 players entered the draft early before completing their senior year, which is up from 2009. It's doubled since then, when it was at 46, and tripled that number from 2000. So increasingly, we are seeing these guys, these young kids that are really my age now, which is kind of scary to think about, getting their degrees in 3 years and moving on. It's still rare. It's not commonplace yet for guys to leave in 3 years and have their degree. We're leaning that way, but it's not like it hasn't happened before either. You go back to 2005, the 49ers first-round draft pick, Alex Smith, who now plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. He left early from school in 3 years after getting his degree. So it's certainly not something that hasn't happened before, but we're not to the point where it is completely commonplace yet. And it's really unlikely that the NFL would change its rules to accommodate younger players that want to leave after their sophomore years or even after freshman years. The last people that tried to get this overturned were Maurice Claret and Mike Williams in 2004, but their bid was shot down by the U.S. Supreme Court. The other aspect of this is, yeah, it's great that these athletes are putting all their effort into getting their degrees in 3 years and they're wanting to leave early, but they're giving up a whole lot to do it. I mean, class in football is really all they do, which maybe that's how you get to the NFL, but they really don't have a whole lot of life outside of that during those 3 years, because they have to be completely focused all the time in order to reach their goal. So, you know, if you see a student athlete that you happen to know that's going through this, give them a pat on the back, because it's certainly not something that is easy to do at all, and really deserves commendation. So thank you guys for listening in. Got a couple more minutes in the show. Got 10-20 minutes left. Want to remind you guys one more time, for those of you that are tuning in, the reason you don't see Kay back here with me is that he's out on assignment in New York. I know he's listening in. Shout out, Kay. Hope you like the show. Hope I'm doing all right on my own. That being said, keep commenting questions, guys. I got a couple more things lined up for you, but I really want to answer your guys' comments. I want to hear what you guys have to say about the show, about sports in general, anything you want me to answer. Please, please, please comment anything that you like, but, you know, keep it polite. All right, one quick question that I did want to get back to earlier. I believe it was Damon Zuber who asked this question, or maybe it was Dylan. I'm sorry, guys. I saw the last name. Your comment disappeared quickly. I can't scroll back on the Facebook live feed right now. But one of you was asking about Liverpool and my thoughts on them this year and how the Premier League is going. So I do want to point out that Liverpool is having a great season. I stick by the fact that I don't see them being title contenders at the end of the year. I think they're 1 year removed from really seriously going for it. I think we have to wait and see how they deal with adversity as we come to the middle of the Premier League season. But I do not believe they will be, in the last couple days, fighting for that title. Thank you, Mother, for correcting me on the Facebook Live feed. That's why you're here. It was Dylan Zuber who asked me that question, so thank you, Dylan, for that. Now, any more questions, guys, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move on and talk about the MLS a little bit, because things are getting exciting. We have gone into the MLS playoffs officially, and I love the MLS as a soccer fan. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's still, for me, not at the level as some of these European leagues, though. I still stand by the fact that if the MLS wants to be relevant, they are going to have to get on a European soccer schedule. That's just how it is. That's how they're going to become more relevant in more places than just the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. It's not an easy task to make such a drastic shift as this, and I think the MLS in their current format is doing really well, especially in our American style of sports with all the playoffs and play-in games and things of the sort. It's incredibly exciting to watch, and I can't wait to really get to watch some of these games this year and dive into it. Kay and I will have a full analysis for you guys of the MLS playoffs next week when he is back. So they're going to be a lot of fun to watch, but unfortunately, I think the MLS is still a little ways away from becoming relevant in places like Europe. Now, a couple more things I wanted to touch on as it pertains to not just the MLS, but American soccer in general. A couple months ago, star women's soccer player who's now retired, Abby Wambach, commented on the fact that Jurgen Klinsmann has chosen a lot of guys in the past for the U.S. national men's team that are U.S. citizens but were not born in the United States. And she kind of took a hit at those players, asking if they were really as committed to the guys that were born in the States. And I was disappointed in her for making comments like that, because I think that's incredibly disrespectful. These guys have chosen to play for the U.S. for a reason. They've shown us that they're incredibly, incredibly committed, and they're great players. I don't know why you would be complaining about having such talent on a team that clearly needs it. There are a lot of young guys that are coming up right now, whether they're born physically in the U.S. or not. They're all U.S. citizens. They're all devoted to the cause, and I just don't see how you can question that as much. It just seemed insulting to me. So that's my take on that. And one more thing having to do with a women's soccer player, this issue we've had with Hope Solo the last couple years. Now, she was suspended for 6 months, I believe, for some comments she made after the U.S. women's team lost to Sweden, saying bad things about how the opposing team played, and she was suspended for it. And these comments are not unusual. They're not something that people don't say all the time, and it just leaves me wondering why she was given such a harsh suspension. I know there's talk of kind of phasing her out of the team in general as she gets older, and there's new young talent coming through the pipeline for the U.S. women's national team. But still, quite honestly, if a men's national team player had made the exact same remarks, they would not have been suspended like Hope Solo was. And I find it a little bit ridiculous, really, that she was given such a harsh punishment for something that a lot of people have done in the past, and really something that I don't see as a huge issue. So there you go. As we finish up the show, I do have a couple more questions to answer, especially from Tyler Humphrey. Thank you so much, Tyler, for commenting a bunch. I love it. So Tyler's next question is, what do you think about sports such as surfing joining the Olympics? Now, I don't have a list of all the sports that are joining the Olympics, but I'll talk on surfing for a little bit. I think it's great adding new sports that people are incredibly interested in. Surfing, I think, definitely belongs in the Olympics. It's a great sport. It's fun to watch. It's really interesting, and I think we'll get a lot more exposure as it becomes a full-fledged Olympic sport. I think things like baseball too will become really interesting to watch. It might not be as exciting as some of the other competitions for baseball, just simply because players' priorities will be elsewhere, not on the Olympics, but it will be fun to have in there, hopefully to make it more of a world sport, and will be great to watch for everyone involved. Now, going into Tyler's next question, back to the point about soccer I was making, is he asked me to talk about how the pay difference for women's soccer and men's soccer is taking effect. Now, this is another question that I've been asked in the past, and it's difficult to answer because theoretically, yes, women and men should be being paid the same thing. It's just common sense. Unfortunately, it's not common law in our country right now, which is incredibly disappointing, but common sense dictates that for the same amount of work, people should be paid the same thing, whether that's men, women, or whatever. What I will say, though, is the MLS and men's soccer may need to reach out a little bit, or there will be women's soccer needs some sort of assistance to become relevant, because what it comes down to is people don't want to watch women's soccer because, in my opinion, they find it less exciting. And when less people are wanting to watch, you're obviously not generating as much money, as much income, and that's going to directly affect how much you can pay your players, how much you can pay really anyone that's participating, whether that's players or advertisers or anything. When you're not bringing in as much money, you just don't have the ability to do that. More people watch men's soccer at home and abroad, and that has a direct correlation on how much they get paid. Is it fair? No. Players should be getting paid the same, but the money available isn't such that it's something that we can do or afford right now. So the real game plan for me would be to help promote women's soccer at home and abroad, find creative ways to make it more interesting, get viewers involved, maybe through social media and things of the sort. And in doing that, if you accumulate more of a follower base and an audience, fans, people who are going to watch, you're going to make more money, and it's going to be a lot easier for the U.S. Soccer Federation to pay women what they earned and really what is rightfully theirs. So it's another tough issue, not something that can be fixed overnight, but something that hopefully we can look into in the coming years and sort out if at all possible. So with that, we have reached 3:59. The show is due to conclude in about 60 seconds. I want to shout out everyone that commented on Facebook Live, everyone that listened on uofsdmedia.com. I really appreciate it. This was a new experiment for me this week, doing the show without Kay. This was a lot of fun. I still love you, Kay. I can't wait till you get back next week and we can talk about really everything that I wasn't able to this week, and I know you had a lot of stuff on your mind, especially as it comes to the NBA, which I wasn't able to touch on because we had a lot of stuff to get to. But rest assured, we'll have you covered. We'll have your full slate of sports again next week here on Bix and K, 2:30 to 3:50 every Monday, uofsdmedia.com, or through my Facebook Live feed, or when Kay gets back next week through his Facebook Live feed. Thank you, everyone that supported and watched. Can't wait to see you next week.